You were not supposed to see me.
The woman stood among the trees as if she had always belonged there. The forest around the settlement was old, older than the prefabricated domes, older than the warning beacons buried beneath the soil. Thick green canopies filtered the sunlight into shifting fragments, painting the ground in slow-moving patterns of gold and shadow. Human eyes saw only foliage, depth, distance, but she perceived layers, thermal gradients, electromagnetic residue, micro-vibrations carried through root and bark. She did not move. She did not need to. Her species had mastered stillness long before humanity learned how to hide. Muscles relaxed without losing readiness. Breath slowed to a rhythm indistinguishable from ambient motion. Even her presence bent subtly around observation protocols, rendering her biologically unremarkable to human scans. She was here to observe. The assignment was clear. Humanity had reached a familiar threshold, expansion without comprehension. Colonies pressed outward, ecosystems bent under machinery, local biospheres altered faster than projections allowed. Her role was not to intervene. Not yet. She was to catalog behavior, assess adaptability, and determine whether escalation protocols would ever be required. Most humans were predictable. They followed routines. They walked the same paths, carried the same tools, repeated the same errors. Fear responses clustered. Curiosity peaked briefly, then dulled beneath labor and fatigue. They spoke loudly, even when alone, as if silence unsettled them. She had watched hundreds over the cycles. Then there was this one. He arrived alone just before dawn, walking the perimeter trail without a weapon drawn. His movements lacked urgency but also lacked carelessness. He stopped often not to rest but to listen. When wind shifted through the leaves, his head turned fractionally, attention narrowing. When a bird startled from undergrowth, his posture adjusted, weight redistributing without conscious thought. Interesting. She adjusted her observation angle, stepping from behind one tree to another with seamless economy. Her cloak absorbed light, breaking her outline into irregular shapes that mimicked bark and shadow. She had stood within 10 meters of armed patrols before without detection. This man stopped. Not abruptly, not with alarm. He simply halted, one foot still slightly raised, as if his body had received information his mind had not yet processed. Slowly he lowered his foot. His gaze did not sweep wildly, searching for threat. It settled directly on her position. Her pupils constricted. Impossible. No human sensor could penetrate the distortion field at this range. No visual acuity should isolate her silhouette against layered foliage and adaptive concealment. Yet his eyes narrowed, not in fear but in recognition. He wasn't certain, but he suspected. For the first time since her deployment began, she felt something unfamiliar press against the edges of her control. She remained still. Minutes passed. Wind stirred. Light shifted. Any other human would have dismissed the moment, written it off as instinct, imagination, fatigue. He did not. Instead, he spoke quietly, voice low and even. "I don't know who you are," he said, not raising his volume. "But you don't belong to the forest. You're too deliberate." Her pulse adjusted involuntarily. The words were not accusatory. There was no challenge in them, only observation. She had studied human speech patterns extensively. Threats carried certain frequencies, fear others. Curiosity, when genuine, was rare and dangerous. This was curiosity, protocol-dictated disengagement, relocation, reassessment, yet she stayed. His eyes met hers through layers of concealment she had trusted for decades. They were not sharp in the way soldiers' eyes were, not hungry like prospectors. They were tired, focused, and unmistakably aware. "I won't come closer," he added after a moment. "Just thought you should know I see you." Silence followed. The forest resumed its rhythm around them, unaware that something subtle had shifted. A boundary crossed not by force but by perception. She recorded the encounter automatically, data streaming through internal channels. Subject exhibits anomalous sensory awareness. Behavioral deviation noted. Recommend extended observation. But beneath the report, beneath the calm precision of her training, another thought formed, quiet, unwelcome, persistent. He wasn't supposed to notice. And now that he had, she was no longer certain who was observing whom. She withdrew before he could move again. Not by turning away, not by retreating in haste, but by dissolving back into the forest with the same quiet deliberation that had betrayed her presence in the first place. Leaves shifted, branches bent, light refracted. By the time he took a single step forward, she was already gone. He stood there longer than he intended to. The trail stretched ahead, familiar and unremarkable, yet something in the air felt altered, thinner, as if a layer had been peeled back. He exhaled slowly, resisting the urge to scan the trees like a frightened amateur. Whatever he had sensed, whatever had looked back at him, panic would not bring it closer again. Eventually, he turned and continued his walk. From a higher elevation, concealed among the upper growth where human eyes rarely lingered, she observed him retreat. Her body had already returned to equilibrium, but her mind had not. Neural processes ran parallel analyses, replaying the encounter frame by frame, searching for the point of failure. There was none. Her concealment systems were intact. Environmental interference within acceptable limits. No external scanning detected. No anomalous energy signatures present, which left only one variable, him. She followed at a distance, recalibrating her parameters. He moved back toward the settlement with unhurried confidence, as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Yet subtle markers suggested otherwise. His shoulders remained loose, but his awareness had sharpened. His path deviated slightly from routine, favoring vantage points with broader sightlines. He wasn't hunting. He was accommodating the possibility of being watched. Few humans adjusted so fluidly. She accessed archival data on the settlement's population. Names surfaced quickly. Caleb Rowe, age, 53 standard years. Occupation, infrastructure systems engineer. Former military service, non-combat specialty. No commendations. No disciplinary record. Psychological profile flagged as stable, introspective, low risk. Recently reassigned to perimeter maintenance after requesting reduced social exposure. Voluntary isolation. That alone placed him outside the median curve. She tracked him through the morning as he returned to work, monitoring power conduits, recalibrating moisture regulators, replacing a faulty sensor near the eastern barrier. Other humans greeted him. He responded politely, minimally. No mention of the forest, no sign of agitation. He did not tell anyone. That decision carried weight. By midday, she had adjusted her observation priority. Caleb Rowe was no longer part of the background sample. He had become a focal point. She shifted closer, narrowing the distance she normally kept. 10 meters, 8, 6. Each step calculated, each pause intentional. She tested his perception from different angles, different elevations. Once, while he crouched to inspect a junction node, she allowed a fragment of her outline to catch the light, just enough to register movement at the edge of vision. His hand stilled. He did not turn, but the corner of his mouth tightened, almost imperceptibly. Confirmation. Her species classified perception anomalies as potential threats or potential bridges. The distinction often revealed itself only after extended contact. Protocol suggested caution. Curiosity suggested otherwise. As dusk approached, Caleb finished his tasks and began the walk back to his quarters. The forest darkened gradually, shadows deepening into layered obscurity. Human patrols avoided this hour. The wildlife grew bolder. Sound carried differently. She stepped onto the trail ahead of him, fully visible this time. Not abruptly, no dramatic reveal. She allowed herself to resolve from shadow to form as naturally as a figure stepping into lamplight. Her cloak disengaged, surface patterns flattening into matte black. The forest seemed to quiet around her as if waiting. Caleb stopped. He did not reach for a weapon. He did not speak. His eyes met hers directly. Up close, she could see the fine lines around them, etched not by fear but by years of observation. His breathing was steady, his pulse elevated but not erratic. "You're not human," he said calmly. "No," she replied. Her voice was controlled, shaped carefully within the frequency range humans found non-threatening. She watched his reaction closely. He nodded once, as if confirming a conclusion he had already reached. "Didn't think so." They stood facing each other on the narrow trail, the settlement lights flickering faintly behind him, the deeper forest stretching endlessly behind her. "You've been watching us," he said, not accusation, statement. "Yes." "How long?" "Long enough." Another nod. He absorbed the answer without visible strain. "Are we in danger?" She considered the question. Truth carried weight. Lies carried consequence. "Not from me," she said. That too was true. Silence followed, dense but not hostile. The air between them felt charged not with threat but with recognition. He was the first human she had spoken to without an agenda beyond assessment, and she was the first thing beyond his world that had chosen not to hide. "You noticed me this morning," she said. "How?" His lips curved faintly, not a smile but something adjacent. "You didn't move like the forest," he replied. "You moved like someone waiting." Her internal systems flagged the response. Accurate. For the first time since arriving on this world, she wondered whether observation alone would be enough, and whether, by being seen, she had already altered the outcome of her mission. Caleb broke eye contact first, not out of fear but courtesy. "I'm not going to pretend this is normal," he said, shifting his weight slightly so he wasn't blocking the trail. "But I'm also not going to run." She noted the decision instantly. Humans who felt threatened either advanced to assert dominance or retreated to regain control. He did neither. He made space. A subtle but significant choice. "You should return to your settlement," she said. "Night conditions reduce your species' sensory efficiency." He exhaled through his nose, a soft sound, almost a laugh. "That's a polite way of saying I'm bad at seeing in the dark." "Yes, fair enough." He took a step back, then stopped. "You didn't answer the more important question." She tilted her head a fraction. "Which is, why me?" There it was, not why humanity, not why now, but why him. She had no prepared answer. "I did not select you," she said carefully. "You deviated from expected patterns. That required attention. That's a long way of saying I stood out." "Yes." He considered that, eyes drifting briefly toward the trees behind her. "Not searching, remembering." "I've been doing that my whole life," he said quietly. The statement registered as neither complaint nor pride, merely fact. She studied him in silence, processing layers of implication. His psychological profile had noted introspection, low social dependency, voluntary isolation. It had not accounted for resilience shaped by long-term marginality, the kind that refined perception rather than dulling it. "You are no longer being passively observed," she said. That made him look back at her. "Meaning your actions may influence future assessments." Caleb held her gaze. "Assessments that decide what happens to us." "Yes." Another pause. Longer this time. "I figured as much," he said at last. "You don't watch like a tourist." She felt something tighten, not in her body but in the conceptual framework she used to categorize interactions. He was not fearful enough, not deferential, and yet not defiant, balanced. "You are calm," she observed. He shrugged. "I spent 20 years fixing systems that everyone ignored until they failed. You learn not to panic when something new shows up. You look for what it does before deciding what it means." Her internal processors slowed, reallocating resources. "You believe I am a system," she said. "Everything is," he replied. "Question is whether it's stable." That answer lingered between them. "You should not speak of this encounter," she said. "I wasn't planning to." "Why?" "Because if I tell them," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the settlement, "they'll start looking for you. And you didn't seem like someone who wanted that." "Correct again. And if I don't tell them," she asked. "Then nothing changes," he said, "except maybe for us." Us, the word carried an unexpected weight. She stepped back into the shadow line where the forest reclaimed the edges of her form. Her outline softened, blending once more with bark and leaf in darkness, but she did not fully disappear. "This is not an alliance," she said. "I wouldn't insult you by calling it one," Caleb replied. For the first time, something like amusement flickered through her awareness, a brief, unfamiliar ripple. "You will be watched more closely now," she told him. He nodded. "I already am." That too was true. She withdrew then, not as an escape, but as a decision. The forest closed around her, systems re-engaging, presence folding back into invisibility. From a distance she monitored his return to the settlement, every step steady, unhurried. He did not look back. That was new. Back within her observation node she compiled her report, standard phrasing, controlled language. No anomalies declared beyond acceptable deviation. Then, in a private channel never meant for transmission, she recorded a separate note. Subject demonstrates adaptive perception beyond statistical norms. Emotional response, neutral. Threat level, negligible. She paused, then amended the final line. Potential significance, unknown. For the first time since her assignment began, the uncertainty did not feel like a flaw. It felt like an opening. At dawn, the forest changed its mind about him. Caleb felt it before he understood it. The air along the perimeter trail held a different tension, less indifferent, more attentive. Dew clung heavier to leaves. Birds paused mid-call when he passed, resuming only after he'd gone by. It wasn't hostile. It was evaluative. He adjusted his pace without thinking. This time he didn't stop. She watched from above, tracking the microshifts in his posture. He had learned something overnight. Not fear, not anticipation, acceptance. The most dangerous of the three. Humans who accepted uncertainty stopped broadcasting panic. They became quiet variables. Her systems flagged the change. She had not intended to meet him again so soon. Protocol required temporal distance after direct contact. Allow patterns to normalize. Allow subject to settle. But the forest, her instruments, her extensions, had already integrated him as a known presence. That, too, was unexpected. She shadowed him toward the eastern boundary, keeping a tighter veil this time. He did not look for her. He behaved as though the possibility of her presence was a given, no longer requiring confirmation. That choice suggested trust, or something adjacent to it. At the barrier node, he knelt to inspect a junction panel. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, fingers tracing conduits, checking seals. He worked like someone who respected systems, not as obstacles but as agreements. She stepped closer, close enough that her shadow brushed the edge of his peripheral vision. He spoke without looking up. "You're early." Her pause was imperceptible but real. "You anticipated me," she said. "Didn't know for sure," he replied. "Just figured if you were going to decide anything about me, you'd want to see what I do when I think I'm alone." That answer recalibrated several internal thresholds. "What do you see?" he asked, still focused on his work. She considered the honesty parameters again. They had already shifted once. Shifting them further carried risk. "I see consistency," she said. "You perform maintenance beyond minimum requirements. You repair what is not yet broken." He tightened a bolt and leaned back on his heels. "That's how you keep things from failing catastrophically. In your species, catastrophe often precedes correction." He smiled faintly. "You noticed." She allowed herself to be fully visible again, stepping into the filtered light. The forest did not protest. "Your kind studies outcomes," she said. "Mine studies thresholds." He finally looked at her. "And we're close to one, aren't we?" "Yes." He didn't ask which one. They stood there for several breaths, the distance between them smaller now but not intimate, measured, chosen. "You're not supposed to interfere," he said. "No. But you already did." She met his gaze. "So did you." He accepted that without comment. "What happens next?" he asked. That question carried more weight than any demand could have. It wasn't about survival. It wasn't even about humanity's fate in abstract terms. It was about trajectory, about whether the line between observation and participation had already been crossed. "Next," she said slowly, "you will continue to live as you have. I will continue to observe. And the part where we keep talking." She hesitated. "That," she admitted, "is not defined." Caleb stood, brushing dirt from his hands. He was close enough now that she could detect subtle variations in his heartbeat, not elevated, but responsive. "Present, undefined doesn't scare me," he said. "It just means nobody's lying yet." Something in her responded to that, an alignment rather than a reaction. "There are others like me," she said. "Observers, some less patient, some less curious. Are they watching me too?" "Not yet, but they will." "Yes." He nodded once, the gesture carrying resolve without drama. "Then maybe it's good that at least one of you knows who I am." That, she said, may prove relevant." A distant hum rose from the settlement. Shift change, machinery cycling, human life continuing in its unremarkable persistence. She realized with a clarity that surprised her that she did not want this moment recorded as a deviation. She wanted it remembered as a reference point. "I will return tonight," she said. He didn't ask why. "I'll be here," he replied. As she withdrew, melting once more into the forest's layered concealment, she noted a final data point, one that resisted categorization. For the first time since her arrival, observation felt reciprocal. And for the first time, she wondered whether the threshold she was measuring had already been crossed, quietly, deliberately, by a man who understood systems well enough to know when one was beginning to change. Night came differently this time, not darker, quieter. Caleb felt it as he left his quarters, the settlement's ambient noise thinning behind him. Lights hummed, generators cycled. Human life continued in its predictable loops. But beyond the perimeter, the forest waited with a patience that felt intentional. He did not bring a weapon. He did not tell anyone where he was going. He followed the trail until artificial light faded completely, until only bioluminescent moss and distant stars marked the edges of the path. He stopped where the trees opened slightly, where the canopy broke just enough to show the sky. She was already there, not hidden this time. She stood at the edge of the clearing, posture relaxed but unmistakably alert. The matte surfaces of her cloak absorbed starlight, but her eyes reflected it, quiet points of focused awareness. The forest did not recoil from her presence. It seemed arranged around her. "You came," she said. "So did you," he replied. That earned a subtle shift in her expression. Not a smile, something quieter, recognition. "You should not make a habit of meeting me alone," she said. "If others of my kind observe this pattern, they'll draw conclusions," Caleb finished. "I know. Some conclusions lead to intervention. And some don't," he said evenly. "Depends on the data." She studied him for a long moment, recalibrating. "You speak as if you understand how we decide." "I understand how systems decide," he said. "People design them, species do too." She stepped closer, stopping at a distance that felt deliberate. Not intimate, not distant, chosen. "You are placing yourself inside the observation," she said. "That introduces bias." "I figured," he replied. "But it also introduces context." Silence stretched between them, thick but stable. The forest breathed around them, leaves shifting in slow waves. "Why did you really come?" she asked. Caleb looked up at the stars, then back at her. "Because if someone's deciding whether we're worth leaving alone, I'd rather they saw us at our best." Her internal systems flagged the statement immediately. Collective representation. Humans often spoke for themselves, rarely for their species without aggression or pride. "And you believe you represent that?" she asked. "No," he said. "I believe I represent what you'd miss if you only watch from a distance." That answer unsettled her more than any threat could have. "You assume my kind is capable of missing," she said. He shrugged lightly. "You noticed me. That wasn't necessary." She did not deny it. "You are changing the parameters of my assignment," she said. "Each interaction compounds risk." "Or reduces it," he countered. "Depends on what you're afraid of." Her gaze sharpened. Not with anger but precision. Fear is not the correct term. Then what is? She searched for the answer longer than expected. Irreversibility. Caleb nodded slowly. Yeah, that tracks. They stood there, two figures balanced on opposite sides of a line neither had drawn consciously. He could feel the weight of it now, not as pressure but as gravity. Tell me something, he said. If I hadn't noticed you, what would have happened to us? She answered without hesitation. Eventually, your expansion would have triggered corrective measures. Not punitive, containing. And now, she said carefully, there is a margin. He let out a quiet breath. That's more than we had yesterday. Yes. A sound rippled through the forest then, not a threat call, not an alarm. A signal. Subtle, distant, her posture shifted instantly, attention splitting across unseen channels. You're not alone anymore, Caleb said. No, she replied, neither are you. She looked at him then, not as a subject, not even as an anomaly, but as a variable she could no longer isolate from the system she was measuring. If others come, she said, they will test you. Hell, by provoking response, stress, conflict. He met her gaze steadily. And you? I will observe, she said. Then after a pause, and interpret. That was not neutrality. That was influence. I should go, she added. Will I see you again? She considered the question, all its implications folding inward. Yes, she said, but not like this. Define this, he said. Her eyes lingered on his face, long enough to register something dangerously close to attachment. Unprepared, she replied. Then she stepped back, dissolving into shadow and signal, her presence fragmenting across the forest until nothing remained but the quiet hum of systems thinking. Caleb stood alone beneath the stars, the weight of the encounter settling into him not as fear, but as responsibility. Somewhere beyond sight, decisions were already shifting, and for the first time, humanity was not being judged solely on what it did, but on who had noticed enough to be seen back. The tests began subtly. Caleb noticed the first one 3 days later, when the eastern moisture regulators failed in a pattern that made no mechanical sense. Not a cascade, not a power fluctuation. One unit failed cleanly, then another 2 kilometers away, then a third at a different elevation. 2 intentional to be random. 2 restrained to be sabotage. He logged the failures, grabbed his kit, and headed out alone. From above, she watched him choose the correct order of repairs without hesitation. The others had arrived, not in vessels, not with disruption. Her species never announced thresholds being crossed. They measured them. 3 additional observers had been deployed, each with different priorities, different tolerances. One specialized in stress response, one in compliance probability, one in escalation modeling. She alone had been assigned context. They did not know she had already compromised neutrality. Caleb reached the first regulator and knelt, opening the casing. The fault was elegant, a microphase desynchronization that mimicked material fatigue while bypassing standard diagnostics. He frowned slightly. Cute, he murmured. That word registered across her channel with unexpected intensity. He adjusted the frequency manually, bypassing the automated correction routine entirely. The system stabilized instantly. Observer 2 flagged the response. Adaptive workaround detected, deviation from expected troubleshooting path. Good, she thought. Let them see that. At the second site, the test escalated. Wildlife interference artificially amplified. Sound cues misaligned with visual markers. A predator-present simulation layered into the forest's natural rhythms. Enough to spike human adrenaline, enough to provoke error. Caleb paused, not in panic, in evaluation. He placed his hand flat against the ground, felt the vibration, listened past the noise, then unexpectedly he stood up and spoke. I know you're doing this, he said calmly into the trees, and I get why. Observer 1 tagged the behavior immediately. Subject displays awareness of evaluation, risk of contamination. She held her signal steady, suppressing instinctive interference. Caleb continued, voice level. But if you want to see how we break, "You're wasting your time. We've been breaking ourselves for centuries." He turned slowly, gaze lifting, not searching for her but acknowledging the idea of her presence. "If you want to see how we adapt," he added, "you're getting closer." The predator simulation collapsed. Wildlife returned to baseline. The observers exchanged silent data. At the third site, the final test arrived. Human confrontation. 2 members of settlement security intercepted him near the barrier, responding to an anonymous alert about unauthorized perimeter activity. Their posture was defensive, hands near weapons, suspicion sharp. Caleb raised his palms immediately, not in surrender but transparency. "I'm fixing a fault," he said. "You can walk with me if you want." They hesitated. He didn't rush them. That patience mattered. As they accompanied him, he explained the malfunction, showed them the readings, taught them how to recognize the pattern if it happened again. By the time they reached the regulator, their suspicion had softened into something else. Respect. Observer 3 logged it instantly. Subject de-escalates conflict without submission. High social stabilizing potential. She felt something like relief. Night fell by the time Caleb returned to the clearing. She emerged silently, visibility partial, letting him feel her presence before confirming it. "You passed," she said. He didn't smile. "I figured I didn't fail." "The distinction matters," she replied. "Then tell me the truth," he said. "How bad was it?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice, not because it was necessary, but because it felt appropriate. "They were not testing you," she said. "They were testing whether I had compromised the assessment." His eyes sharpened, "But they will not remove me." "That's good," he said. Then after a beat, "Is it enough?" "No," she admitted. The word carried weight now. Honesty had become habit. "They will return with deeper tests," she continued. "Scarcity, moral conflict, choice under pressure." Caleb exhaled slowly. "They want to know who we are when it costs something." "Yes." He met her gaze. "Then you'd better stay." Her internal systems flickered. That request, simple, unguarded, crossed a line no protocol covered. "I am already staying," she said quietly. The forest held them in that moment, stars shifting overhead, systems recalculating far beyond sight. For the first time, the observers had data they could not fully model. A human who adapted without aggression. An observer who interpreted without distance, and a margin that was no longer theoretical. The scarcity test arrived without warning. Supplies to the outer settlement modules slowed, then stopped entirely. Not from mechanical failure, logistics chains remained intact, but from a quiet reallocation of priorities. Emergency protocols did not trigger. No alarms sounded. It was the kind of deprivation designed to be explained away until it couldn't be. Caleb noticed within 48 hours. Others felt it sooner, but they named it differently. Bad luck, delayed shipment, administrative error. Humans were good at tolerating the early stages of strain, especially when it came wrapped in plausible excuses. Caleb walked the perimeter twice that evening. She followed, closer than before, her attention divided between him and the widening net of observation beyond the forest. The others were watching now, truly watching, not data points, decisions. "They're testing us," he said quietly, not breaking stride. "Yes." "How long do they let it run?" "Until behavior diverges," she replied, "or until someone forces it to." He stopped at the edge of the clearing. The settlement lights behind him flickered faintly, their rhythm just slightly off. "They want to see hoarding," he said. "Conflict, who takes first, who takes more." "And if that happens?" he asked, already knowing the answer. She didn't soften it. "It will confirm existing projections." He nodded slowly. "Then we don't give it to them." That night Caleb called a meeting, not an official one, no authority, no broadcast. He spoke to people the same way he had fixed systems his entire life, one conversation at a time. Maintenance crews, hydroponics techs, 2 security officers he trusted. He didn't use words like threat or alien. He talked about load balancing, about sharing excess before it spoiled, about quiet redundancies, about not panicking until there was a reason to. By morning, storage allocations had shifted organically. No declarations. No enforcement, just subtle cooperation moving faster than fear. Observer 3 flagged it immediately. Collective adaptation without central command. Statistical anomaly. Good, she thought. Let them choke on that. The second phase followed quickly. Moral conflict. A simulated medical emergency. One patient. Limited resources. A choice engineered to fracture trust. The kind of scenario her species used to decide whether intervention was mercy or necessity. Caleb was called to the clinic by accident. He stood in the doorway while voices overlapped inside, doctors arguing, protocols colliding. The patient wasn't critical yet, but the window was narrowing. "They want you to choose," she said quietly from beside him, invisible to everyone else. Between what? Efficiency and equity. He stepped inside without hesitation. He didn't override anyone, didn't demand authority. He asked questions instead, clarifying ones. The kind that forced assumptions into the open. Within minutes, the dilemma collapsed, not solved but reframed. Resources redistributed, the patient stabilized. No heroics. Just refusal to accept a false binary. Observer 1 recorded the outcome with visible recalculation. Subject rejects forced dilemma, alters system constraints, unexpected variable. The final test came last, choice under pressure. They isolated him, not physically, socially. A rumor seeded through the settlement, quiet, believable, about Caleb, about him knowing more than he said, about him being different. Distrust grew carefully like mold. Enough to make people pull back. Enough to see what he would do when pushed to the edge. She watched him walk through it. He didn't defend himself loudly, didn't retreat. He stayed present, answered questions when asked, didn't chase approval. Let time do the work fear wanted to rush. It took days, but eventually the rumor starved. Observer 2 flagged the result. Subject maintains cohesion under social exclusion, low resentment index. She felt something tighten then, not concern, not fear, pride. That realization startled her more than any data anomaly. At the edge of the forest, she met him again under a sky thick with cloud and distant stars. He looked tired now, not worn down, used. "That was them, wasn't it?" he said. "Yes." "And we passed." She hesitated. "You did," she said. "We are still being decided." He met her gaze, eyes steady. "And you?" For a moment the weight of her assignment pressed in fully. All the protocols, all the thresholds, all the careful distance she was supposed to maintain. "I am no longer neutral," she said. The words landed softly and changed everything. From above, far beyond the forest, the observers finalized their models. Projections shifted. Escalation curves flattened. The margin widened, fragile but real. Humanity would not be contained, not yet. And not because of what they could destroy, but because one man had noticed enough to be seen, and one observer had stayed long enough to understand what that meant. The observers withdrew in silence. No announcement, no confirmation, just a subtle easing of pressure that Caleb felt before anyone could name it. Systems stabilized, supply routes normalized. The forest's attention softened, no longer taut with evaluation. Life resumed its rhythms, but nothing returned to what it had been. Caleb stood at the clearing at dawn, the sky pale with early light. He hadn't been summoned. He hadn't been instructed. He simply knew this was where the story paused, if not ended. She emerged slowly this time. No concealment, no partial presence. She stepped into the open as herself, the forest parting without resistance. In the daylight, her features were sharper, less forgiving than at night. Not beautiful in a way meant to please humans, but compelling in a way that made honesty feel mandatory. "It's done," she said. He nodded. They decided. "Yes." "And we're still here." "Yes." They stood facing each other, closer than they ever had before. Not because danger demanded it, but because distance no longer served a purpose. "What happens to you now?" he asked. She took a moment before answering. Not to calculate, she had already done that, but to choose language that carried the truth without burden. I will submit my final assessment, she said. Humanity will be classified as adaptive, non-terminal, and conditionally left unaltered. Conditionally, he repeated, yes. He accepted that easily, too easily. Conditions change. They always do. Silence settled between them, not heavy, not tense, complete. You changed the outcome, she added. He shook his head. I didn't do anything special. That, she said, is precisely why. Her gaze lingered on him, not as an observer now, not as an evaluator, something else, something closer to acknowledgement. There is a recommendation attached to my report, she continued. Caleb raised an eyebrow. That sounds dangerous. It is unconventional, she admitted. I have proposed continued presence. His breath caught not sharply, not visibly, just enough to register. Here, he asked. Near, she said. Close enough to understand changes as they occur. Close enough to intervene before thresholds are crossed. And close enough, he said carefully, to notice again. She didn't look away. Yes. That was the moment the line finally dissolved. Not with drama, not with declaration, but with mutual consent. You won't be an observer anymore, he said. No, she agreed. Not only that. What will you be then? She considered the question, the first one he had asked that she could not answer with data or protocol. A witness, she said, and perhaps a participant. Caleb exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his shoulders at last. That sounds like work. It is, she said, then softer, but it is meaningful. They stood together as the sun rose fully, light spilling through the trees, touching both of them equally. The forest no longer marked one as subject and the other as system. For the first time, they shared the same horizon. I won't pretend this is simple, Caleb said. I would be disappointed if you did. A faint smile touched his mouth. Not hope, something steadier. You'll be seen now, he said, by more than just me. Yes, and if others come, if the decision changes. Her gaze shifted upward toward the sky no human sensor could fully read. Then the margin will be tested again, she said, and we will respond. We, the word settled between them, fragile and real. She stepped back not to leave but to mark a new boundary, one that could be crossed intentionally, not accidentally. This is not the end, she said. I figured, Caleb replied. As she turned toward the forest, her presence no longer folded into invisibility. She remained visible until the trees closed naturally around her, until concealment became choice, not necessity. Caleb stayed in the clearing long after she was gone, watching the light shift, feeling the quiet weight of what had begun. Humanity had not been saved by strength, not by dominance, not even by unity, but by attention. And somewhere beyond the forest, beyond the sky, systems were already adjusting, slowly, cautiously, around a variable that had refused to remain unseen. The observers would return one day. Next time they would not be alone. And neither would he.
Sie lacht halt erstmal trotzdem, ne?
Ja.
Das ist echt schlimm.
Wie diese Memes, ne, wenn er so steht, so, ich muss Okay, Schluss mit Liebe. Ja, wir haben das Thema ja schon geswitcht.
Versuchen wir, wir waren doch schon bei Zynikern noch gerade. Und
Genau.
Ja, aber zynisch bin ich ja wirklich nicht.
Lass den Kopf nicht hängen.
So Leute, langsam wird spannend.
Ja, ich würde euch verlassen und was zu trinken suchen. Tschüss, schön, dass du da warst. Und danke für das Asyl. Ja, kannst du mir auch wieder rüber schicken. Da muss ich auch noch vorstellen. Er stand eh schon in der Tür, wollte er nicht. Ich versuche ihn mal hier reinzukriegen.
Er wollte nicht. Was?
Ich sag ihm, der Stoppelfee noch ein Interview schuldig. Ja. Tschüss, Chat. Bis später. Namaste.
Wer wollte hier nicht rein? Jochen? Hab ich das richtig gehört?
Ja, der hat es jetzt nicht aufgezwungen, sagen wir mal so.
Warum?
Ist halt schüchtern. Schwaben sind schüchtern.
Darauf sprechen wir
Ich bin
gleich
auch
mal an.
Schwab. Schwable.
Ja, ich bin auch schüchtern.
Er ist doch gar kein Schwabe in echt, das merkst du doch. Der kommt doch hier völlig auf unsere Wellenlänge daher.
Ja, ich übe mich im Hochdeutsch sprechen.
Das musst du aber mal
hier.
ein bisschen lernen.
Ja, ich versuche es.
Hier.
Ja, das ist diese Wolkendingens da.
Ja, der hat jetzt aber auch hier
Wo sind wir?
Guck mal hier, Alter, er hat gar keine Motorhaube mehr. Nur Plastikabdeckung. Da regnet es rein, Bruder.
Guck mal hier.
Schönes Einzelding.
Wo bist du denn jetzt gerade?
Kansas
Das
City.
ist hier nach Westen. Das sieht ja da hinten. Das sieht doch hier Richtung Columbia. Oder?
Ja, es wird genau auf dieser Linie passieren hier. Also wir sind eigentlich genau...
Ich habe mich großkotzig verabschiedet, ich bin wieder da. Das ging schnell.
Warum? Haben sie dich nicht reingelassen?
Doch. Aber ich weiß nicht, was da drüben los ist. Der Beifahrer sitzt hat keine Lust hierher.
Was sagt er denn?
Er will nicht.
Wirklich?
Ja.
Habt ihr euch gestritten?
Nein. Nein.